Hello, everyone. It's Mr. Barden here. I'm coming to you from my classroom instead of my normal living room space. Hopefully, the air conditioner won't be too loud. It gets a little loud in this corner, um, but we'll get along with it. What I'm going to be talking about today are audio interfaces. So I talked a little bit about the different kinds of microphones and how they work, and that is great to know. However, there's an important step in, especially in modern recording, where you have to get the signal from the microphone into the computer to do the stuff, um, and all that stuff. And that is where the interface comes in handy. What this interface does is act like a go between in between the microphone and the computer. Um, and I've got up here on the screen right now some stuff from sweetwater.com. They're a great place to order audio equipment. I will say, not this is not a sponsored thing in any way, but they're definitely worth checking them out. I get a lot of equipment from them, and if someone from Sweetwater happens to see this and wants to sponsor, I do have a few microphones that I'm looking to acquire. Um, but half jokes aside, let's hop right into it. So an audio interface, like I mentioned, goes in between the microphone and the computer. There's a lot of different kinds of different form factors and connections and things like that. But the most common I've found, other than like an internal part of your PC, are these external USB connected devices right here. And I'm just kind of scrolling through a variety of them, but you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities. It's, a box. It's usually kind of thin and wide. They've got certain connectors on one side and a bunch of knobs and all that. But what it actually is it? What is it doing? Well, what it's doing is it is receiving audio from the microphone inputs, which we can see right here. And we can set the various levels, and it will digitize it. So basically, it will look at the incoming electrical signal and say, "Oh, that we have this much signal at this point," and then at the next sample time, it'll say, "Oh, now we have this much signal and this much and this much," and basically, this happens so quickly that we get it's a snapshot of what's going on, but there's so many samples that it's a very accurate snapshot. A frame, you could think of it, of what the audio was at that particular moment. And it sends that via USB into the computer. Uh, Also, the computer will send the data back out via the USB to the interface, and this will then convert it back into an electrical signal that we can then send, usually out the back, but through some kind of ports to the outputs. So again, this has two main things, what we call the analog to digital converter, where we go from the microphone to a data file, and then a digital to analog converter, where we go from the data numbers to an electrical current to be amplified out the speakers. So those are the two main things that these interfaces do. Other than that, we then get varieties of, okay, how many pickups are there, pickups inputs are there, how many outputs are there. You then get into more specific things like what kind of preamps and other components, and that gives each of them their own unique characteristics. But generally speaking, that's what they do. You get most of your characteristics from the microphone and how you position yourself around that. um, I do want to mention real quick that a USB audio face is distinctly different than a mixer. So the shortest version of this I can pull up uh, and mention here. Let me just find a good mixer just for the picture. Uh, so what a mixer will do is it will take in a bunch of inputs, and again, that varies from mixer to mixer. Some of them have different effects and things you can do, but you're able to, with every mixer, adjust the volume from all of these inputs and output it as a stereo track. This is different from an interface. So the interface has the input gain like we can see here, but it doesn't usually have all of this extra stuff. That is for the computer to do. So it's not going to export, it's not going to send, just a stereo electrical signal out somewhere else. It's going to, again, send that data file with it's not a file, it's a data stream. But it's going to send that directly to the computer with as many channels as needed. So if this were an audio interface, which actually it is, this would have the option to send in 24 different channels at once. Um, this a lot of modern mixers are also USB interfaces as well, but not all of them. And that's just an important distinction I want to make, is that again, the a mixer uh, mixes the levels of a bunch of different sources and outputs a stereo signal, whereas an interface has usually less inputs, but those get sent individually to be controlled by other stuff on the computer. And then it also does that digital to analog conversion, whereas a mixer doesn't necessarily have to. Okay, so again, I showed a whole bunch of different interfaces here, and they all have different price points because of components and features and brands and all that. Um, the ones I have for my class are the uh, presonus audio box USB 96. They have two different versions, the 25th anniversary one, as seen on the screen, as well as the original, which I've got one right here. The only difference, other than the fact that one, is like the original model and one's revised, but really the only difference is that the front is blue, the knobs are, it's just different colors. That's essentially it. They still make both of them, um, so you can still find them. This one's nice and handy, partly because I teach the course using Studio One, and this is just plug and play with that. But this is a very handy device because, again, it's very simple. A lot of that plug and play feature. It also happens to be on sale right now, but it's usually not too expensive. Um, but let's look at it. So this particular one has two microphone inputs right here and several knobs. So we can set that input gain, like I mentioned, for each of the channels independently. We can adjust the headphone volume and the volume going out the main speakers right here. And there's a thing called the mixer knob. And this can be a little problematic for some of my students. Not every interface has this. In fact, I've really only seen it on the PreSonus interfaces. And that is this mixer knob, which allows you to mix between more of the microphone inputs or more of the computer output as to what you hear in the final output coming out of your main speakers and headphones. So usually I just put that right in the middle so I hear things evenly. But if you don't want to pick up anything with your inputs, you can turn that knob towards playback, and vice versa. So again, it's pretty handy. This just connects to the computer with a USB cable. That's all it is. It's pretty simple. Just plug and play. The back of it has this USB port right here. You can also use it to send and receive MIDI messages. I personally don't really do that with what I do, so I'm not going to talk about that. I'm sure you can find other resources that go a little bit more in depth with that, but I just know that you have the ability to send and receive MIDI information, even though I don't use it with what I do. And then we've got the main output jacks and the headphone jacks. Those are 1/4 inch connections instead of the XLR connections out here. Although these can also take 1/4 inch, as you can see with those. I think the only thing I haven't mentioned is this little button right here on the front, which is used to activate phantom power if your microphone needs it. It applies it to both of the inputs at the same time. On larger interfaces, you may have multiple switches to be able to turn them on and off in banks as needed. But that's, again, just a little overview of the parts of an interface. Again, yours might be different, depends on what you have, but generally they're fairly standard as to what they have at the base level. What I want to talk about now is how to implement this with Studio One. So actually, at the moment, I've got a audio box already hooked up, and that's what I'm recording with this microphone. But in order to utilize your interface with Studio One, you need something important, and that is the drivers to make sure everything works. With a presonus device, there is conveniently. Let me see if I can just find it right here. No, I just installed you. Where did you go? Well, this computer is acting weird, so instead, we're just gonna head over here and do this. Um, Presonus. This app here called Universal Control. So, what this does is basically this is a very handy software which I recommend having if you use any kind of PreSonus equipment. Uh, and basically, what it does is it handles all of the drivers and a fair bit of the settings for your various devices. So, here's an interface. This is the Studio, the big one. So this is a much larger interface with a lot of more stuff on the back happening. There's a microphone, but what this will do, this will update all of the drivers, all of the firmware, all the stuff that you have automatically, and it'll just handle all of that more or less in the background. I'm good, thank you. Um, Enjoy that cough sample. I'm not going to re-record this. So and that's what we have. What's going on here again? That is controlling all the bits and pieces and all the drivers. So, if you have any Studio One stuff, definitely I recommend installing it. If you're not, then just check your device manufacturer and make sure that you have the drivers installed. Moving back into Studio One, once you've connected your device, you'll usually see it right here in this little box. Uh, I'm going to click on it, and that may make OBS that is recording my audio currently get a little angry. So it looks like I'm still recording audio. Uh, what I've done is clicked on that box and pulled open this little audio setup window, and this will pull up whatever audio device Studio One is looking at. This one is set for a specific interface where I normally plug my laptop in over at a different spot, and that has a unique driver. But if it is a PreSonus interface, it will usually pop up automatically, but you'll see that there's a handy little icon right here that looks like the interface. We can select the one we need, or again, if you have a different one and all your drivers are installed, you should see it right here. But you click the device, you can verify a few settings, but usually you should be able to set them here, but you may have to go into like if it was PreSonus Universal Control or some other interface setting in order to adjust some of the things like the sample rate and block size and various other things. So you may have to change that. You could do it in Studio One. You could do it in a different program. It just depends on what you have. I don't know what you have, so that's just me being a little intentionally vague for no real reason. So I think that's just about it. We talked about how an interface has microphone inputs that you can connect your usually XLR cables in, how it converts that into data stream that then gets read by the computer, and then it does the exact opposite of that. You can set all the knobs. It's not a mixer, but it is a very handy piece of equipment. And again, I have been recording this entire thing on the black version of the audio box right here, so you can see that on the screen. So they work. They're nice. They're handy. Generally, I recommend getting the smallest one that you need. It's very nice to have the big interface, and I've acquired several over the years. If I were to hook all mine up, I could plug in something stupid like 40 microphones. Not everyone needs that, but these things do get a little pricey, so I recommend, generally just get what you need, maybe one size bigger in terms of amount of inputs and outputs. So that way you work with things. Four is a really common number to work with. It's pretty easy. Eight is kind of the bigger end of what's standard, with one and two being, again, smaller. I think that's just about it. If you have any questions about anything specific about audio interfaces, how they work, recommendations, stuff like that, definitely put that in the comments down below on the video, and I'll answer those. I love seeing those when people put them in. And if you learned or enjoyed anything, definitely consider, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. It definitely helps out, and I appreciate it. So that's where I'm going to end it for today, and I will see you all the next time that I see you. Bye.